Okay, welcome back. We're still on page 7. So, the Internet of Things. It was this really cool story where a particular company, casino, put in, a huge aquarium, and they put in thermostat in the aquarium, and it was connected with Internet of Things to their wireless connection for the internet. And bad guys found out that that was a way that you could connect to their network and went in there and they got hacked. Yes, a casino got hacked through a thermometer. Yes, that's what Internet of things can do for you. Okay, so basically the landscape kind of started to change. Before it was just people having fun, kind of an amusement, like I'm kind of bored and I want to show off my programming skills, so I'm going to come up with these cool little joke things. Why I remember one that flipped the screen upside down, and I remember one where you move the mouse and it would like chase after you, and it was all sorts of cool stuff. It didn't do any harm, but it was kind of fun. And now, of course, that's not the case. Now there's the purpose for this is organized crime, ransomware and getting money out of you and stealing your trade secrets and, stealing your Bitcoin. I even heard a report, I'm not sure if I believe it all, that North Korea, that some huge percentage, I'm making these numbers up, 20% of their military budget is made up from stealing cryptocurrency over the web. Kind of cool. Okay, so on page 8, they talk about what is security? Well, come on. It's protection from adversaries. Now, not necessarily an adversary, because you could know that you're attacking somebody or you could not know. Remember the story I told you about a guy who says, well, I don't have anything on my computer, and so I don't care. Yeah, but his machine might be attacking you, and so he's an unwitting accomplice. He doesn't know that he's attacking you, but he is. So there's a term, a quote. Don't get too excited. I don't get quite excited about quotes. Protection of information and its critical elements include the system and hardware that store and transmit the information. Okay. So the 3 pillars. Dun, dun, dun. So this is basically talking about information security and governance and the policy. And so computer security, data security, and network security. Those are the 3 pillars we just talked about. So basically, you're really talking about, data being like data at rest and then data in flight. Okay, kind of making sense. And then the actual physical hardware security, those kinds of things. So you can't just like harden the machine. That doesn't work. And you can't just like, oh, well, I've got antivirus, I'm done. No, you got a lot more to do than that. So the 3 pillars. What's more important is the CIA triad. This is often shown in the shape of a triangle because it talks about confidential integrity and availability. So this is the CIA, not that CIA, but the CIA integrity. So it's kind of shown in the shape of a triangle because if you tug on, you think confidentiality is very important, so you kind of strengthen that. Well, that means the availability is probably going to go down. You can't have it all. You can't do all 3 simultaneously at 100%. Each one of them has to be like 33% to make this thing work. So confidentiality means that only the people who are supposed to see the data get to see the data. Okay, no one else can see it. Integrity means it cannot be manipulated or changed without your knowledge, or there's some degree of certainty that who sent the thing is actually who sent it. There's no guesswork like on an email. And availability means everyone who has the legitimate need to get to it can get to it. And so if you make confidentiality so robust that people can't get to the data, you've accomplished the mission of confidentiality, but not for your business, because your business requires people to actually have access to sales data. Okay. All right. So some key concepts on page 9 through 11. So we're talking about, these are just terms. Don't get excited about terms. Access, that's your ability to use something, right? An asset, which is something of value, the protected resource. An attack, that's pretty straightforward. But by the way, does an attack have to be intentional? Can I have an attack where somebody just accidentally clicked on something? Yeah. A control. Typically, we're talking about hardware or software or security. Could be even policy kind of a thing. Physical software and policy. An exploit. Now, exploit and vulnerability. I'm kind of doing these in alphabetical order, but a vulnerability is I know that there's a weakness. For example, I don't have a deadbolt on that door. Okay, I know that. And an exploit is somebody broke in because there was no deadbolt. Okay, so the difference is I know it, but no one's actually doing anything. And the exploit is, yeah, they're actually using that thing. Exposure. This is things that are known to a hacker. How much information do you typically expose people to, through your website? A loss, I mean, you suffered some sort of damage. A profile, a combination of controls and safeguards. The risk. Now, risk is almost always shown in probability because businessmen are going to want to know how much money are we spending to safeguard that particular asset. If the asset is worth $100, I'm probably not going to put a $500 lock on the door. You see what I'm going after? So they want, what's the probability of someone coming after an asset? The probability of occurrence. The subject, the target of the attack. A threat, that means a potential. Now, a threat could be something like, hey, there's a thunderstorm coming. Okay. A threat agent, a specific instant or component like a hacker. A threat event, which means something has occurred. A threat source, which means the category or the location of where something occurred. And then vulnerability means a potential weakness. We just covered that one. Okay, so they talk about this as key concepts. And so here we have theft, and the agent is some hacker. Okay, and so yes, you can go to these websites. For example, Mad Hack's website will actually give you a toolkit that you can use to exploit a company. Basically, it's a hacker's toolkit. And a vulnerability. For example, somebody's poking around and they realize, oh man, there's a thing called SQL injection that's being exposed here. Yeah. And then so they get in some sort of a way and steal stuff, use a vulnerability, and pull down the customer's database. Yeah, that's could be rather devastating. Now, the source of the attacks. Okay, everyone likes to talk about hackers. Yeah, oh yeah, and then the communication, and then remote server. That's the object of the attack. But quite frankly, to tell you the truth, businesses often have to deal with a heck of a lot more than external threats. Okay, because all it takes is an incompetent or ignorant employee. Apathy is a horrible thing. Yeah, I know we're supposed to have long passwords, but I've had this password since I was a teenager. I'm just going to continue to use it. So apathy and ignorance is probably worse than having to deal with a hacker on a laptop sitting at a coffee shop. Okay, characteristics of information, page 11. So we're talking about confidentiality one more time. So provide access to the users who need it, and encryption is typically the way you solve that problem. So while it's at rest or while it's flying across the wire, no one can see it. Information classification, you could have, for storage and policy and education. And this is a reoccurring theme. You're going to have devices, you're going to have, software and controls and policies. All three, every single time. So example. So confidentiality. What happens if somebody mistakenly emails the price list to an external user? Yeah, that would be bad. Okay, because it tells you what the profit margin is for everything. So next time they bid on something, they're going to get outbid. A hacker breaks in, yeah. And then how about a paper report that gets thrown in the trash? And then somebody digging through the trash does dumpster diving and finds out all sorts of cool information about your company and your price list and your customers. I had a story where I had a software package that required people to enter their social security number. And then I would do security checks, and I would run around and look in the trash, and every once in a while I'll find a printed report of that stuff that had their social security. And so I'd fuss at them and say, you don't do that. But it never really stopped. And so, quite frankly, what I did was I altered the software so that when you print this particular report, it just doesn't print that column. It was kind of a silly solution, but quite frankly, it's the only one that really worked because I could not continuously just beat these people over the head. It was not solving the problem. Okay, so there's a thing in here that talks about the list of data breaches. And so, here's a lot of cool stuff, immigration and customs, some 4,500 employees, whistleblowing and police in Netherlands and transportation and California. This goes on and on and on. There's an awful lot of things where not externals necessarily. This is data breaches involving governments. And sometimes it's like whistleblowing. It's like, nah, come on. Sometimes it's hacked. Sometimes it's just poor security. Anyway, the idea is that confidentiality is kind of sort of a key to this whole thing. If you don't want people to have your personally identifiable information, then it better be encrypted. Okay, integrity talks all about trust. So no modifications have been made. If I sent an email to HR that said, Mr. Jones deserves a 10% raise, I don't want somebody to catch that in flight and change the 10 to a 20. So when it arrives at HR, they go, oh, this guy gets 20%. I need some way of knowing that no one has modified the email at all. And this is done through a thing called digital signature. So encryption for our, the whole concept of confidentiality, because no one can see it except the intended person. Integrity, everyone can see it. But you can also verify that it came from the person who says it came from. That's one. And two, it has not been altered. So integrity provides me two things. Authenticity, it came from who it says it is. And then the second one is no one's messed with it. And kind of a third one is what's called non-repudiation, which means you can't come back later and say, well, it wasn't me that did that. It's like, yeah, it was. Because either A, you're lying, or B, someone has your password. Either one, it's bad. Okay. So, ransomware is all about, corrupting this kind of stuff. And so if you had integrity checking going on, maybe some sort of a hash routine, back in the day, antivirus software would create a file hash, basically using some encryption technique, which we'll talk about in Chapter 10. Where it goes in and makes a number. A file gets assigned to a number, and if the file changes without it knowing, well, then the hash would work. So if someone went in and edited a file on a shared folder, I'd be able to tell, okay, because it got altered. If a file got corrupted in transmission, maybe there was no hacker involved and no listening involved. It's just circumstance. I mean, there was a lightning bolt or something and a bit got flipped and it just so happened that it went on through. That could happen. And again, integrity controls could do that. All right, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark again, so we'll do this way we always do.